I'd like to welcome everybody back today, Alabama Care. We're here in Birmingham, Alabama with Mr. Jeff Underwood, the president of the Lakeshore Foundation. And at this point, I'd like to hand it back over. Mr. Underwood, if you would introduce yourself.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. Jeff Underwood, the president of Lakeshore Foundation. I'm thrilled to be able to have this opportunity to talk about who we are and what we do.
Well, we appreciate the time you're spending with us today. And today we're going to do an introduction to Lakeshore for anybody that's not familiar. Now, I feel like the Lakeshore Foundation is a staple of the Alabama community when it comes to disability. And being here on your campus is just incredible. And you guys have some new structures that have been gone up in the last year. And we'll get to talking about that a little bit as well. But I always like to ask, are you originally from Alabama?
Well, I have spent just about all of my life in Alabama, most of that actually here in Homewood, Alabama, but I was born in Albuquerque, lived there a couple of years, lived in Phoenix a couple of years, and then my dad got transferred from a position in Phoenix to Birmingham, and I've moved away a couple times, lived in DC for a while and lived in Louisiana for a while, but for the most part, you know, been in Birmingham just about all of my life.
That's funny you say Phoenix to Birmingham because that was my exact move. I grew up in Philadelphia, then went to Phoenix after school and moved here about 4 years ago.
Okay. Well, my move here was in 1956 when my mom and dad loaded me and my two older brothers on the train from Phoenix and moved to Birmingham. So I was here, that was obviously a long time before you made the move.
Well, I would say a train is probably a better ride than taking the I-10 through Texas because that thing takes like a day and a half. We always like to ask, football, college football in Alabama, is it Roll Tide or War Eagle?
I went to, it's Roll Tide. I went to undergraduate school at Alabama in the business school, majored in economics. But also, and then after undergraduate school, I moved to Montgomery and decided I wanted to go to graduate school. And I have a master's in public administration from Auburn in Montgomery. So
Okay.
some people say, well, how do you do both of them? And, you know, but I'm a Bama fan.
Yeah, I was going to say on Iron Bowl day, since you're graduating both.
I mean, I think all that only, if I had gotten my graduate degree from the Auburn campus, maybe that argument sort of holds up. But
Yeah.
No, I'm a strong Bama fan.
I feel like the undergrad degree kind of holds you to that school.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah. And you may mention, how long have you been here at Lakeshore?
Well, this coming July, I will mark my 30th year here at Lakeshore.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. Oh, wow.
No, I didn't.
Every time I say that out loud, I kind of go, oh, wow, that's a long time. But yeah, it's a true statement. In July of 30 years ago is when I started here.
Well, it's a blessing to hear that because I feel like a lot of times nowadays people switch jobs or organizations, but to be able to stay with an organization and grow with it and watch it grow continuously is a good feedback, for the community especially.
Yeah, well, it's such a good place, and we've had so many positive things happen. We've had a very supportive board of directors, a tremendous staff, and our work's important, and it has value to the people that we serve, or at least we think it does, and we try to make it that way. And so it's just been a good fit for me for a lot of reasons.
Now, before Lakeshore, if you could give us a little bit of history of your work before that.
Yeah, I mentioned I went to undergraduate school at Alabama. One of the things I was interested in out of undergraduate school was the work of urban planning, and even though my undergraduate's in economics, there was a program at the university at the time. You could get a certificate program in urban planning and development. Mm-hmm. So after undergraduate school, I got a job working for the city of Montgomery in their planning department. And I say that because actually, as Lakeshore has gone through some campus redevelopments, I found that experience to have kind of been helpful. Worked for the city of Montgomery for a few years, and then I wanted to get back to Birmingham, and then I got a job working for Jefferson County's Planning and Development Department. And what's significant about that is that while I was there, I got to know one of the all the county commissioners pretty well, but County Commissioner Ben Erdrich ran for Congress from his commission seat. And I was able then to get on his congressional staff. And that's what moved me to Washington in the early 80s. So from 82 to about 84, 85, I lived in Washington as a legislative assistant to Congressman Erdrich. Interestingly, his wife works out at here, Lakeshore now, so
Oh,
we've kind of
really?
maintained that connection. And that experience too has been helpful because from time to time at Lakeshore Foundation, I find myself wanting to or needing to interact with our congressional delegation. So quite frankly, having been there on the ground, you kind of know the way things work, and that's been an asset as well.
Yes, sir.
After Washington, my wife and I didn't want to stay there forever. We had a great experience in Washington, but
Did you feel like it
again,
was a
we're
little-
ready to move back home and start a family, and so I started sort of looking for a job and was able to land a position at UAB at their Comprehensive Cancer Center, where I was for 6 years. And again, in the last several years, Lakeshore Foundation and UAB have developed a very strong research partnership. The fact that I worked at UAB for 6 years again helped me to sort of understand sort of how UAB works and kind of what that environment's like. So when it came to partnering with them, I felt like I had a little bit of some sort of foundational knowledge about what working with UAB would be like. But at UAB, after about 5 or 6 years there, I started realizing I'm not an MD, I'm not a PhD, and I'm not a finance guy. And those are the kind of positions where there's a lot of upward mobility in an academic medical center. Mm-hmm. So I said, what else might be out there for me? And a friend of mine told me about that Lakeshore Foundation, newly established organization, hiring its first ever, president and CEO. And I was real intrigued with that. With the idea of somewhat of a test for myself. Could I go to an organization and be successful at Lakeshore trying to sort of build the work of the foundation? So threw my hat into the ring, went through the interview process, and here I am.
Yeah, well, congratulations. And on behalf of the community, we thank you.
Yeah,
You've done great work here.
Yeah.
You kind of setting me up for all of my talking points going through UAB experience and the research. And now in a little bit of research there, I noticed Alabama Senator, correct?
Well, yeah, I've always had an interest in government. My dad was actually on the Homewood City Council back in my high school or middle school days. And so I had a little bit of a sense of public service from my dad. And when I got back home from Washington and got settled, I decided I would throw my hat into the ring of, first of all, city of Homewood politics, and served as the council president for a little while. And during that time, the Senate seat that represents Homewood, the state Senate seat, became vacant. And so I ran for that vacant seat and was, served in the state Senate for, it was about a 3-year period. It had to make that decision between, I was working for Lakeshore at the time and doing the Senate thing.
Yeah.
Kids were pretty young at the time. It was somewhat of a challenge. And I'm glad I made the decision that Lakeshore was really the more important of the two. But I also have to add, just for the record, that I enjoyed my time in the legislature. Mostly it was very frustrating, but again, you learn a lot about how things are done. You learn some things that are valuable to you later in life. Some of the members of the Senate at the time were still there, and I kind of stay in touch with them. But I did try to stay in the deal. And what I tried to do was, without going into too much detail, which will bore you to death, I ran for the House seat instead of the Senate seat.
I'm going to redo this. We're not getting some audio through that. Let's just try turning it off, and we'll pick up right where you left off. And Clifton, let me know if that's coming true. And we'll get a test. Go ahead.
Okay, pick back up.
Yes, sir.
So I made an effort to stay in the legislature on the House side, and the voters decided they preferred the incumbent. So in a way, it wasn't just my decision to walk away from the legislature. The voters helped me on that decision, which, looking back on, I think we all made a good decision.
Well, and you've hit on a few points there where it's your experience has allowed you to bring that to the next level and to your next, what you're doing in the future there. And I think that's a really big thing. Sometimes we can feel like it's tough to get started on something, but all you have to do is make that that first step and kind of snowball that, and it'll be with you for life there.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll ask some follow-up questions here in the future about the legislative advocacy, because that's something that we talk about quite frequently. Is sometimes parents and individuals seem frustrated that things aren't getting done quick, or maybe their voice isn't being heard, and to have kind of an insider perspective would be great. But before we get there, if you could tell us a little bit about the mission and a little bit about the history of Lakeshore.
Sure. Let's do history, because history sort of kind of rolls into mission.
Yes, sir.
This physical property that we're on, this 45-acre campus that Lakeshore Foundation owns, was first developed in the 1920s as a tuberculosis sanatorium, an inpatient facility for Jefferson County residents who were suffering from TB. In the late 60s, early 70s, as this country started getting on top of the treatment of tuberculosis, the need for inpatient TB sanatoria was playing out. And the board of that Jefferson Tuberculosis Sanatorium said, okay, we no longer need to operate a TB hospital, but what does the community need? And they looked at a variety of options, but what they discovered was that the most pressing need for the community at the time was a new rehabilitation hospital for physical rehabilitation. So in 1973, I think the last TB patient was discharged and the first rehab patient was admitted, practically at about the same time. And it was reopened as Lakeshore Rehabilitation Hospital. Now, from time to time, people say, well, there's no lake, so kind of where's that word come from? But for those of us who've grown up around here, even though I don't remember it physically, there used to be a lake along Lakeshore Drive, i.e. the name. It was called Edgewood Lake. It was evidently a popular recreational spot for a lot of people. But the lake was I think it was the victim of a Corps of Engineers flood control project. So the lake's gone, but the name lives on. So Lakeshore Rehab Hospital opens in the 70s. And in those early days, a lot of the patient population were individuals with more severe injuries, such as spinal cord injuries. And if you have a spinal cord injury or another type of severe injury or illness, you need to be physically active. These folks had gone through acute rehab. They've gone now through some outpatient rehab. But when you go home, all you do is sit around, you're going to decondition. Your situation is going to get worse. So the leadership of Lakeshore Hospital in those days recognized that problem and said, we have to provide some kind of post-rehabilitation activity for these individuals. So Lakeshore Hospital started a wheelchair basketball team back in the mid-70s, playing on parking lots or wherever they could find a gym that would allow them in, which was a real challenge in those days. And over time, those programs expanded to include not just folks who were being discharged from the hospital, but people in the community who were living with disability. And they expanded into other sports and other types of fitness activities. But if you really trace back sort of who we are today at Lakeshore Foundation, it goes back to that same idea about how important physical activity is for a person with a disability. And to sort of fast forward this pretty dramatically, again, over quite a few years, more people involved, more of a community-based program versus just a hospital program, a lot more activity. Eventually, the board of directors of Lakeshore Hospital, having operated these programs as therapeutic recreation programs of the hospital for many years, they said, we need to put these type of community-based activities under a separate nonprofit, separate from the hospital. And they established Lakeshore Foundation to be the home of those community-based sport and fitness and recreation programs. The foundation operated for several years without any staff, without just volunteers or hospital employees playing that role up until the time that really that I was hired in 1991.
Yeah.
So.
As the first president. I love how you say that you need to be active there. I have a family member that has cerebral palsy, and she is 57 now. And a lot of the individuals, what I hear, a lot of the individuals that have her disability don't necessarily live that long. And I really give it to her parents, my grandparents, that made it an integral part for her to keep moving, whether that's in the house, trying to do as much unassisted as possible, whether that's crutches. And she has a great life. And today, she has been a member of Lakeshore for the past 2 years. So she, before COVID happened, she would come to the pool here at Lakeshore twice a week, or would do once a week in the pool, and then once a week stretching and on the equipment downstairs.
Yeah.
And it was something that she hadn't done in a long time, getting in the pool, but to see her be able to get in there and move on her own unassisted, it was like she had her freedom back, where she didn't have to have one of her caregivers holding her up, or being with her and assisting her, but she could go wherever she wanted in that pool all by her own. And I think a lot of her long success is because her parents, and I tried to continue that. You have to be active. You can't be laying in a bed and not doing stuff on your own, kind of stuff.
Boom, that's our story. That is the core of who we are and what we do and why we do it. It's finding a way to be active given your individual situation, and that activity helps you be healthier and more independent. And if you're more independent, generally your whole psychology, your mindset is better. And so often we hear stories, it's because they had a parent or a grandparent or a family member who maybe pushed them.
Sometimes you need a little bit of that.
But people who are in an environment of high expectations tend to do so much better. A lot of times, too often, people with disabilities are around very caring people, maybe their family, maybe their neighbors, maybe even their caregivers or their medical providers, but those folks have low expectations. And we strongly believe in having high expectations for the people that are within our mission. And quite frankly, what we find is if you set the bar high, these folks want to achieve. They just need oftentimes a little bit of help. Show me how, and they'll do it, and then they'll become independent on their own. We get a lot of publicity for our sports program and for our injured military program. Those are great aspects of what Lakeshore does. But we often say that the heart and soul of Lakeshore are the members of the community who are fighting the good fight, trying to be active and trying to be independent. Oftentimes not needing a whole lot of help, but they need an environment that's the right facility, the right equipment, the right staff member who understands their particular needs, and quite frankly, the right welcoming attitude. So when that person comes in the door, they feel like it's a place that understands them and is willing to work with them. So those are kind of the core ingredients of what it takes to deliver what we deliver.
And it is very inviting when you walk in the front door. It's very open arms. How you doing? Come on in. If you're new here, let's do a tour. Let's see what this is all
it's
about.
That first impression that's so important, because you only get one chance at that.
That's very true. And the being active, I was a college athlete, but even today, I feel like if I'm having a rough week or a rough day, if I'm active, if I go and lift, or if I do something, I play hockey in Pelham, if I do something, I feel a lot better.
Oh, yeah.
My bad days turn good, and my good days turn better, just by being active there. I saw something on Twitter the other day that said, and this is kind of broad reaching, but the doctors of the future will first off prescribe you like 3 hours outside, a gallon of water, and a couple, 20 to 30 minutes of walking will be your first thing. They're not going to give you a pill. This will be your first thing that you have to do.
So we're going to turn medicine upside down, and they'll talk about wellness and activity first, rather than sort of, oh, by the way, you might want to get a little exercise.
Yeah.
That'd be a great day. That would be a great day.
Yeah. Well, you guys are leading the cause here. Now, you mentioned that the Lakeshore Foundation is kind of a separate entity, but you guys still on campus on the 43 acres do have therapy here, still in the other buildings.
Well, we are not a clinical provider. Our programs are sort of the health and wellness sort of post-rehab type of programs. But to answer your question, first of all, Lakeshore Hospital is still running. Lakeshore Foundation is still sort of the owner of that. But our board of directors made a great decision back in the mid-90s, founded on the idea that the future of Lakeshore Hospital is going to it will be best if if the day-to-day management and operation of the hospital is put in the hands of the private sector. So in 1994, the board said rather than governing and running a hospital, we're going to turn that over. Initially a lease with a company called Relife. Relife and HealthSouth merged. HealthSouth today is Encompass Health. So today Encompass Health is sort of running and managing Lakeshore Hospital. The very strong aspect of that for Lakeshore Foundation is that the income that we get off renting the hospital, 100% goes into the foundation's budget. So in that one transaction, the annual budget for the foundation increased dramatically.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the board said, okay, we're going to turn the hospital operations over to the private sector, and we're going to focus the nonprofit all on the work of the foundation. But your question related to therapy, so in Lakeshore Hospital, they are doing inpatient therapy. We also, there's other therapy going on campus. Something we're real proud of, we're real excited about in the last several years is that Children's of Alabama, Children's Hospital, in an interest of, we've had a long-standing working relationship with Children's, but we were really excited when they expressed an interest in having a clinic on this campus.
Yeah.
And they are doing outpatient therapy in a building that they lease from the foundation, on the campus. That's probably 3 or 4 years old now. And most of the clinical specialties that they are offering on campus are for children and youth who are very suitable for involvement in programs of the foundation. And these children and youth and their families get in the habit of coming to this campus. Children's in that outpatient facility, they put some wonderful images of kids playing sport or doing active things. As those children go to their facility on campus, they're starting to learn about the work of Foundation and what they can do. And the number of children and youth that we're serving since the opening of that facility has really gone up. It's just been the transition from their therapy into the youth programs here has been tremendous.
Yeah.
So we're real proud of that relationship with Children's.
And I feel like for a family or for individuals, it's really nice to be comfortable on a campus, because sometimes when you're going to a new location for maybe therapy and going somewhere else to see a doctor, somewhere else to go, for your community life and activity, it can be overwhelming. But to be comfortable on a single campus, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And I love that you say with the children's and even with the therapy, it's kind of going from that therapy, the children's therapy, to Lakeshore Foundation here and being active. And I think that, I would think that a child that would come over here and see some of the activities, maybe somebody that is a couple years their senior or an adult, and doing the things that they want to do, creates that expectation, that long-term expectation that you were talking about, and helps that growth.
Yeah. Take a kid who's interested in sports. And maybe this kid's, has a visual impairment. Maybe they're a wheelchair user. More than likely, they're not getting a lot of sports through their schools. That's gotten better, but they come here and all of a sudden on the court next to them, there might be a Paralympic athlete.
Yep.
Some
That's amazing.
guy or gal from, halfway around the country who's come to Birmingham to train to be on the U.S. Paralympic team. Or when we host events, you can walk in here when we host our annual Pioneer Classic basketball tournament, and you'll see hundreds of kids and adults in chairs playing sport, having the time of their life, but also engaged in competition. And so folk, they come in here and they see those opportunities, and that's that's strongly motivating.
Yeah, it's like
because you see somebody like you doing something and you say, well, they can do it, I can do it.
it's like rubbing elbows with your hero.
Oh yeah,
Just
yeah.
weekly.
And the senior athletes, on whether they're adult athletes playing for Lakeshore club teams or whether they're the Paralympic athletes, they are always, they welcome the opportunity to be mentors. And because they have probably all realized there's been somebody in their life that's helped mentor them into an athletic career, and they want to give back.
Now, how did Lakeshore become kind of the center for Paralympic athletes?
Well, first of all, go back to that original, first thing we did was sport. So sport's always been a big part of who we are and what we do. As those programs in the 70s and the 80s grew, that was also a time in this country, really internationally, globally, where the Paralympic movement was starting to grow. The first ever Paralympic Games weren't until 1960. So Lakeshore was evolving and growing in terms of adapted sport opportunities. Nationally and internationally, Paralympic sport was growing. This was also happening at a time when the United States Olympic Committee, this was before they formally added the word Paralympic to their name, which they just did a couple of years ago. The United States Olympic Committee, back to 1998, had the responsibility of serving America's Olympic and Paralympic athletes. That was a responsibility dictated by the Congress. And they weren't doing a very good job on the Paralympic side of the house. One of the springboards for us in terms of formalizing the relationship was the Atlanta Paralympic Games.
Okay.
They're a couple hours away. We had teams from Sweden and Bosnia and somewhere else came over to Lakeshore to train for a couple of weeks before they went to Atlanta. We spent a lot of time in Atlanta. Our staff did. Started engaging in more conversation with USOC. And one thing we heard a lot of was what the US athletes wanted and needed was more training opportunities. And we kind of said, we can do that. I mean, we got facilities, we got staff, we got to have expertise. We already had some programs under our belt. And we also knew then we were on the verge of building some new facilities. So we started paying more attention to what the potential role between Lakeshore and the United States Olympic Committee would be. And the United States Olympic Committee was starting to pay more attention to their commitment to Paralympic athletes. And several Lakeshore staff, including myself, were on sort of some planning committees of the USOC to help figure out what their role should be in the Paralympic movement. And so the relationship between Lakeshore and the USOC really started growing.
When you talk about Atlanta, that seems like a great opportunity for Lakeshore, being close geographically, but also, as you were mentioning, how the United States was kind of growing in the Paralympic space, and that's a great opportunity. But the work that you guys did up to that point, the hard work that you guys put in, primed you to take advantage of that.
It did,
grow.
and there weren't many organizations in the country who there still aren't enough organizations in this country doing the kind of work that Lakeshore does. There were just probably less than 5 back in those days. I don't even know how many it was. But the one thing we eventually did to sort of to formalize the relationship with the Olympic and Paralympic program was to offer ourselves as a training site for Paralympic athletes. We were just bringing this facility online. We started a conversation in the late 90s, went through a very thorough application process. It took about 3 years, but finally we were designated in 2003 as an Olympic and Paralympic training site. And still maintain that designation today, one of about 11 or 12 in the country. And the other thing that happened in terms of our relationship with the Olympic and Paralympic Committee was we were one of the first organizations in the country to make a strong investment in support of wheelchair rugby, which was a growing sport in those days. And Olympic Committee needed an organization to manage the National Paralympic Program, and has contracted with us for the last, I don't even remember how long, ever since wheelchair rugby has been on the Paralympic program. They've contracted with us to manage that sport on their behalf.
Now, I hear wheelchair rugby, but I've heard there's another name for that. That's
One of the original names was Murder Ball.
yes.
And there was actually a documentary film which was nominated for an Academy Award with the title of Murder Ball. I would encourage anybody to go back and see it. It's a really good film. A lot of it was filmed at Lakeshore while the team was training, as they were preparing for, I think they were preparing for the Athens Games in '06.
And that featured Mr. Bob Lujano, who is here at Lakeshore.
Yeah, Bob's since retired from the sport, but he's still on our staff. So
he was on with Mr. Lorenzo Brown on Alabama Care, I think 2 weeks ago, talking about his experience.
Bob's got a great story.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I've met him a few times.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, with the inclusion part of that, can anybody be a member of Lakeshore?
No. Short answer is no, but I hate to give short, abrupt answers
No, that's
when the
perfect.
word's no. So, but we have a mission as an organization. Our mission, our expertise is in the area of physical disability and chronic health conditions. As you might imagine, coming out of a rehab hospital, that's where the original expertise was. So to be a member at Lakeshore, and currently we have maybe 3,000 memberships. Some of those memberships are families and couples. You have to have a condition that somehow limits your daily living. It can be a physically disabling condition. It could be a chronic health condition. The words are interesting because I know people who are wheelchair users. They don't identify with the word disability. They consider themselves very healthy, active folks. That's always a challenge, I think, for us in terms of our messaging, is finding the right words to use that define who we are here to work with, but also not to help people understand it's not everybody. Mm-hmm. We also, in our membership program, allow anybody who's age 60 or over to participate.
Okay.
Most of whom have some type of chronic health condition that would otherwise make them eligible, but also understanding the importance of activity as you get older as a way of preventing a fall, maybe preventing situations such as stroke or even dementia through physical activity.
Yeah.
So you have to qualify through some sort of health condition or by age to be a member here.
Do you think that will ever change in the future? Because kind of what we see, or what I hear about, is inclusion. And I feel like we had an opportunity to do a broadcast with a restaurant owner in Alabama, and he's made very clear that a certain percentage of his staff in each restaurant has a disability. And he said that what he's noticed in the attitude of the staff at those locations is gone from more of a work environment to more of a family environment, and to see that. And I think another word that we hear is awareness, for people that aren't aware. And I wasn't very aware of the community before coming to Alabama and being involved. We had a greater capacity for my family member, but I do kind of feel along those lines that contact and awareness can play a big part. And I almost imagine what would it be like if some people that were going to the gym regularly or the pool regularly came here and were immersed in this community, and they would take that back with them.
Alex, it's a great point. First of all, we want to make sure that we, let me also say, family members of the folks who qualify are sort of included in our membership program. We want to make sure that there's enough time and space and staff availability for the members who fall within our mission. And there's, if we were to just open up to all of the community, you have to keep in mind that if you don't fall within our mission, more than likely you have some options in the community. You have local YMCAs, park and rec facilities. You have options. A lot of the people that we serve don't really have an option. So we want to stay focused. The idea of total inclusion, awareness, immersion, the terms you use, makes a lot of sense to us. I don't think we're not there yet. Who knows post-pandemic how, as we look at things differently, I think everybody's going to sort of take lessons learned from the pandemic and try to say, well, going forward, have we learned something that we might want to revisit some of our past assumptions about what we do or why we do it. For now, though, I don't see us just opening ourselves to the total community, mainly out of a fear it would kind of dilute the attention that we can give to the people who do fall within our mission.
Yeah, I think you would have a line down to Lakeshore if you did, first off. But, in a startup community or business community, if you try and serve everybody, you're not going to serve anybody because you're not going to be around long.
We see, when people come here for meetings or gatherings and they're not coming here for reason to participate and they see what we do, the points you made about awareness, it changes your attitude about what we should expect and how we should interact with people with disabilities. That exposure is real powerful.
You may not be eligible to become a member currently, but the doors are open if you do want to be a guest for the day and see a sporting event.
Oh, when we have sporting events, we love it when the community comes out. I would look to the day when we had to turn people away because we had the gym full.
Yep.
But we're getting better, and a lot of people will come and they'll go, wow, and I want to come back and bring my neighbors, bring my kids. People particularly like bringing their children to see a wheelchair sporting event.
Yeah.
And folks often walk in the building, and I remember a few years ago we were doing our Pioneer Classic wheelchair basketball tournament, and we reached out to local schools and asked their cheerleading groups to adopt a team.
That's a great idea.
And these cheerleading squads they'd walk in our building and they'd see a gym full of kids and chairs, and you could just look on their face like, wow, I'm not sure what to do. They were uncomfortable. And we'd introduce them to their team, and that interaction with a whole group of kids in wheelchairs versus these cheerleaders who'd probably not been around many people their age in wheelchairs. Within a day, the cheerleaders, they couldn't leave. They wanted to come back. Their enthusiasm went up tremendously. It takes that kind of awareness and exposure to be transformative. But that was so much fun over a 2-day period, or maybe it was 3 days, how much the attitude of those cheerleaders were and how enthusiastic they were to sort of connect with this team that they were assigned to cheer for during the event.
That's an amazing process that you just spoke about there, and to be innovative thinking behind that. I never would have thought about bringing cheerleaders for those games. That's amazing. So
well, it just added some pizzazz.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Now, you mentioned that things look a little bit different now in the past year and a half because of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. How have some of those things, or how has that affected services here at Lakeshore?
Well, so our pandemic experience, which obviously started about a year ago, and we were shut down for about 2 months while, I remember when we shut down, we said, well, we'll be back in a couple of weeks, probably like everybody else said. But as soon as we shut down, we started recovery planning because and trying to figure out what can we do that fits within protocols. The challenge for us, our population is more vulnerable. So I think in many cases we went beyond the CDC suggestions for safety. But we also are a population that needs to be active. So where's the balance? You don't want to be shut down completely because physical activity is so important to the people that fall within our, people tell us all the time, we're sort of their lifeline, we're their reason for getting up in the morning. And so we had to provide service at some level. So really, since then, we've been operating on somewhat of a limited way. Gradually, as we've learned about how to do things better, we have opened up the process a little bit. And now that people are getting the vaccine, they're coming back. But we still have all the safety protocols. Just as when you guys came in the door, you sort of saw what we do. We still haven't opened the locker rooms. That's an area where you can't enforce sort of the distancing as you can in other parts of the facility. But we I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping things active and providing a good level of opportunity for people to be active. But one thing we have done, we were already talking about it, and it really accelerated our virtual programming. We in this sort of new addition to this building, we have a lot of technology and new equipment that has greatly enhanced our capabilities in virtual programming. So while many of in the early days of the pandemic, we were not doing group classes for obvious reasons, but we started a lot of virtual programming. And we're still doing virtual programming, and I think we're probably going to be doing virtual programming on an ongoing basis, even post-pandemic.
Now, virtual programming, what does that mean?
Well, it means you're at home. It means you're not here, and we are, and you're seeing us through your screen, and we're leading exercise classes.
Is it like through Zoom? So is any?
Yeah. And I think the last count was we had 32 different classes that we were offering on a regular basis through the Zoom format, through the virtual format.
Yeah, and that still allows for that connection.
Yeah.
That is so vital there.
And the great thing about that is there's no geographic limit to that. And we feel like that's why we think virtual programming, virtual wellness is going to be a strong part of Lakeshore going forward. That may be one of the sort of the positive leftovers from the pandemic, is that we'll be able to reach out on a wider geographic basis to folks for participation.
Yeah, somewhere in Montgomery or rural Alabama.
It's really the only limitation is your broadband. If you have the bandwidth to participate, which is an issue in Alabama, which we're aware of. But no, I think the pandemic has accelerated our use of technology to deliver programs in a virtual way.
I feel like we all kind of got slapped in the face when the pandemic happened. From a provider level, I run a provider for my family member, and we contract with the state for her services. And we had to shut down all the community outings. She loved coming here once or twice a week, going and visiting places. And I don't want to downplay COVID in any way, because I know it's very deadly and can cause a lot of harm to individuals. But it almost, when I think about it, we're kind of lucky it wasn't like an Ebola type of thing. And it was kind of, it gave us a little bit of chance to set in place things that if it does happen in the future, which may or, is likely it could happen sometime in the future, that we'll have a better game plan to how to react.
Yeah. One of the disappointing things to us has been that we can't provide that social environment, that social experience that so many of our members enjoy while they're at Lakeshore. They may come over here and work out for 30 minutes, but they might stay here 3 hours because they have a little social club and they're drinking coffee. They might be telling stories. They might be, back when there were printed newspapers, they might be sitting around reading the paper. But you see the social interactions a lot, and we haven't been, we're not able to do that in the current way we're operating. So I'm really hopeful that, we have a recovery plan and a reopening plan that we're working on. You just can't predict the timing of it. But we're looking forward to the day when we can get back to the level of operation, because our members will really benefit from being here longer, being able to have more social interaction, having the locker rooms ready, which I think we're pretty close on that, because we figured out some ways to make that work. So
that's something that not a lot of people talk about, or starting to gain a little bit of traction now, is the mental health of the pandemic. We talk about the physical health and how the COVID can really affect you, but I like being out. I like to go play hockey, and if I've had a rough day, I need a workout. I need to get some. I need to blow off some steam. I need to talk to my buddies. We need to chirp each other a little bit. And I haven't had that for a long time, and it took an effect on me, and I think it does to a lot of people.
I think so too, and I think for folks who have a tendency already to deal with a lot of barriers in their life, the people within our mission, people with disability, I think are more affected by, are more inclined to have those issues of sort of mental health issues than others. And I think there's this transition over the next, 3 months, 6 months, year or 2 years, I think we have yet to really know, learn, and understand how we as a society are going to, what life's going to be like for us post-pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think younger people and then sort of older people are probably going to suffer more, or maybe not suffer is the right word, but are going to have a harder time sort of adjusting, or maybe have more mental health issues.
Yeah, especially long term.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to do an overview. You guys have a lot of different services here at Lakeshore. And we could probably talk about this for days. But if, Lakeshore originally started with the physical activity and being active there. And if you could just give us an overview of some of the core services or programs that fall under activities that are available at Lakeshore.
Yeah. And sort of the bucket, so to speak, of our physical activity programs, fitness and aquatics. I mean, fitness, I don't know how much detail you want about each one of them, but fitness is what it is. I mean, we have a wide range of equipment, a wide range of programs. We have personal training. We have a higher degree of equipment that is accessible, and a lot of that equipment is it has design that's built in so the wheelchair user can, on his or her own, pull the bench away and roll up and use it. So fitness and aquatics are what most of our membership are engaged in. Mm-hmm. We have group classes in fitness and aquatics. You can sort of learn to swim. You can just swim on your own. We have two different pools. One of those is what we call a therapy pool that runs about 93, 94 degrees, which is a very warm pool for pain and other types of conditions. Mm-hmm. We have some classes that are diagnostic specific. We have a really interesting new program that called Movement to Music, which is a dance program. What's interesting about M2M is it came out of a research project, and you imagine I'm straying a little bit from your question, but I'll come back to it. You imagine a company is doing research and development, and they're trying to identify new products. Well, in this case, through our research effort, there was a study to see if this idea of a specific dance protocol could help would have a positive impact on issues of pain and balance and flexibility for people with Parkinson's disease.
Okay.
And then it proved to be successful, and so now we have this movement to music program that have been tested to be effective.
Yeah.
Through research. But back to your question about the sort of within physical activity, it is fitness and aquatics. That's a large part of what we do. We have a very active outdoor recreation program. We have an active cycling program. The cycling can be on our field house, where a lot of people walk on the field house, in the field house. And we'll set aside times where we open the field house for cycling. We do a lot of off-campus cycling.
Do you in the community? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that? Because there was a lot of cycling in Phoenix, and they kind of planned for that in the urban planning. They have huge bike lanes in a lot of Phoenix and downtown. I have a road bike, and I just don't feel comfortable some places in Birmingham taking that road bike. I love to go down to what's the state park right down there by Pelham? I'm drawing a blank right now.
Oak Mountain?
Oak Mountain, yeah. Oak Mountain's great for outdoor biking. I don't know if I feel comfortable doing it on the roads in Birmingham.
Well, we'll take groups down to the Shades Creek Trail, and then we'll do trips occasionally. Is it the Ladega Trail near Anniston? It's an old railroad bed.
Okay.
So we do controlled, organized trips because of the safety factors. I mean, Birmingham's a very popular cycling community, but it's also real hilly, and there aren't a lot of separate bike lanes, so we have to be careful about that.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing about our cycling program, we have a great inventory of different types of bikes, hand bikes, recumbent bikes, and variation upon variation. So we try to make sure that depending upon your own situation, there's some bike that's going to work for you. So a lot of outdoor recreation activities. We have some shooting programs. We have a shooting range here in the building where we do air rifle, air pistol, and archery. And then we a couple times a year we'll take people, if people are interested in hunting, we'll take folks on hunting trips. You know, the staff here, people come in, they sort of join, and we say to them, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And then we try to tailor a program to their needs. And we don't like to say no when somebody says, well, can I do this or can I do that? We just say, sure, let's figure out how to do it.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and then whoever's helping the staff,
Within physical activity, there's also the sports program. We have a very active, what we just call the club or the league sports program. Youth and seniors and youth and adult. Some of those are competitive programs. There are organizations like the National Wheelchair Basketball Association and the United States Quad Rugby Association. So we have teams that play in those leagues, and those are national competitions. We have recreational programs. We're doing more pickleball, which is popular among and pickleball it's an inclusive sport, just as wheelchair tennis is. You can play what people call one up and one down, somebody in a chair and somebody standing.
Okay.
So and then we have, there are a variety of other sports and activities that we do within that physical activity space.
Now, if you could speak on the Lima Foxtrot, I know that's a big thing that you guys provide for retired service members.
We're real proud of what we've done in that injured military space. And I think it goes back to about '06, when the incidence of battlefield injury was really something we were becoming also aware of as our troops were getting involved in conflicts around the world. And as we started reading about people losing limbs or having spinal cord injuries or head injuries or eye injuries related to their service, we said we can help. You know that's the kind of space that Lakeshore's been in for years, is helping people with those kind of disabling conditions become more active. So we started we started what we thought was going to be an annual camp. And we started sort of knocking on the doors of the military, the National Guard and others, to tell them, this is who we are and this is what we do, and it's not going to cost anything. We'll fund everything. And people looked at us kind of funny at first.
Yeah.
But eventually the program really, I think once we demonstrated to sort of military-related organizations, and once we got some inroads at Walter Reed and made some contacts there, people realized we could really deliver on providing these very sort of oftentimes life-changing sort of programs. So somebody post-injury could learn how to recreate again with their family, go hunting, ride a bike, play court sports, go swimming, go kayaking. And early in the days, somebody mentioned to us that if we branded that in military terminology, it might be more effective in communicating it. So the L, Lakeshore, the Lima is the L for Lakeshore, Foxtrot Foundation.
I like that.
But I like that too. That was just kind of like made common sense to us. And I don't remember exactly who it was, but during the course of a couple of years after that, one of the participants said, what this means to me is liberty and freedom, as the L and the F. And I just said, what a great comment.
Yeah.
What a great comment. So, but anyway, the original idea was Lima Foxtrot, Lakeshore Foundation. And we're just really proud. That's going to be a part of what Lakeshore does for years. And it's just a great thing that battlefield injury is down. But a lot of folks get hurt in training. I mean, military training itself is high risk. And we've had a lot of incidents, a lot of participants who, I remember a guy here who was, he fell off the back of a truck while he was loading a truck, and somebody else was sort of diving and broke their neck while they were diving in training. there's always going to be military training. Conflicts are going to flare up from time to time, and so to date we've had about 2,600 participants in our Lima Foxtrot program from 46 states. Again, we thought it might start as a once a year weekend camp, and it's 4, 5, 6 times a year. We'll do about 5-day camps. Folks come in from their community. We'll get them from their house and back without any cost to them.
I was going to follow up with that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And the way that you guys approach it here, you know, for the members, anyone that's looking to become a member, and even what you were talking about with Lima Foxtrot is contacting, but saying, what do you guys want? And then let's build something around that.
Yeah. So I have to say the reason we can cover those costs is because this community's been very supportive of that program. Mm-hmm. And whenever we feel like we need to make an appeal to the community to support that program, it's always there, it's always strong. So, but there are a lot of great, at the end of each one of those camps, we'll talk to the participants, you know, what have you learned, what would you do different? And it ranges from, you know, a woman saying, you know, this camp has saved my marriage, to another woman one other time saying, well, one thing I've learned this weekend is that my husband can do a lot more around the house than he was letting. She said, I've watched him do this, this, and this, and at home he wouldn't even take out the trash. So the secret was out. I think that guy had, his to-do list went up.
Yeah, his honey-do list kind of multiplied at that point. But everything you're talking about here, no matter if you want to come and just use some of the equipment here, the weight training equipment, when we walked in, the pool is amazing, and there was a group class going on, calisthenics in the pool, or whether you want to be more competitive at the Paralympic level, or you know, all of these things. There are so many levels that you can get involved in here, and you guys really are able to serve the community at large in everything that you guys do.
And it's the staff. I mean, we have a staff here who they're here because they want to work with people with chronic health conditions and disability. They want to make a difference. They are you know, well trained. They're again, they're not PTs and OTs. They are certified recreation specialists, exercise physiologists. Are folks who've had sort of extra training related to serving the population that we work with, and they're very passionate about what they do. Mm-hmm. And you can see the results of your work, you know, in doing what they do. You can see a new member come in, and sometimes within a matter of days or at least weeks, you know, they're doing things that they weren't doing when they first got here. And that's really motivating and rewarding for a lot of our staff. So.
A lot of the staff and a lot of the individuals, because that can be the basis. If you're struggling with something outside, like work or something like that, if you just get in and you see some progress going on and your gains, that'll help out.
I mean, people walk in. I love this observation. People come in the building maybe for the first time. They say, man, this building's great. The facility's great. When they leave, they talk about how wonderful the staff is. I just think that's the right bookend. You got to like the building when you walk it in, but when you leave, if you're complimenting the staff, then that's the way it should be.
Yep, that's a win for the organization. If you could talk about, and we're not going to take up too much of your time this morning, so if you could just talk a little bit about research and then kind of touch on the UAB Lakeshore collaboration that you guys have going on.
One thing I want to go back to on the programmatic stuff is that, and I'll do this quickly. Several years ago, we realized if we are truly interested in the overall health of our people within our mission, it can't just be activity. The spectrum of health is nutrition and mindfulness as well. And we have built programs, and we've built out facilities, including this amazing new sort of nutrition lab and a mindfulness lab. And we're offering more and more programs in the area of nutrition and mindfulness, recognizing that, again, the overall, it's a more holistic approach to health. So those are important elements of what we do in that program activity space.
What does mindfulness mean there?
A lot of it is you know, meditation, it's yoga, it's sort of stress reduction, mm-hmm. It's there's a mental health component of mindfulness, and it's a growing program here at Lakeshore. I think to date, most of the activity that that you might call mindfulness are related to programs in yoga and sort of meditation type programs
Deep
that are
breathing
often
or-
built into some of our classes.
Yeah. That's amazing because you don't see that at many facilities.
Yeah.
Touching on those things, and then the nutrition side of it, is that kind of coaching people how to eat correct, or I won't say correct. But
It's what to eat, how to eat. Oftentimes for particular health conditions, or a certain diet is ideal versus other types of diet. Teaching people how to cook. It's somewhat of a demonstration kitchen that we have with technology built in with cameras and screens, so we can broadcast what's going on there sort of off-site.
And you guys have that here on site, that kitchen.
And it's fully accessible. The workspaces can raise and lower, so a wheelchair user can participate in the kitchen. And some of the appliances are. You think about your oven at home. You probably have a door you pull down, and pulling down, then you have to reach into it. The doors on ours are hinged on the side.
Yeah.
So the person, and they're lower, so the person who's the wheelchair user can independently sort of put things and take things out of the oven.
That
Pretty,
makes-
pretty basic thing for us, but it's one of those little barriers that a lot of people run into.
It makes sense now that you say it, but I wouldn't have thought of that before.
Well, I think that's true of so many things. Once you think about it, it's not that big a deal to make the accommodation or to make the change. And I think that's one thing a lot of companies and other organizations realize, that the accommodations that oftentimes are needed, if they're needed at all, to serve that client or a customer with a disability or hire that person with a disability are not that significant, and the benefits far outweigh the cost. But you ask about research.
Yes, sir. You guys do quite a bit of research here.
Yeah, and we operate our research when we built this building, we went through a fairly intensive sort of study of sort of who we are and what we do and what was needed in the community, not just the community of Birmingham, but the community of people with disability. And one thing we heard a lot from was that there was very little research going on related to the impact or the importance or the availability, the effectiveness of a lot of the programs that were being done. And we started saying, well, maybe, people would tell us there's research that's needed related to disability and physical activity. We need, and the question, we need to prove to people this works, this is important. And folks would say to us, you have such a large program, it's almost like it's this living laboratory of activity. If you could ever put some science, combine some science with that, it could produce some body of research work or findings that could have an impact on people globally.
Yeah.
So we started a research program as a department of Lakeshore Foundation, and did some pretty interesting studies, but realized too that if we were really going to maximize the research, we needed to hook up with a research institution.
I imagine there's quite a bit behind that if you're going to be doing all the data and.
Well, the infrastructure of running a research program is pretty involved.
Yeah.
You can't just have a team of researchers. You got to have a lot of other stuff that goes along with it. So after a few years of our research effort running as a department, we said we need a new model, and again, we looked at the different models, but the obvious and the best was a relationship with UAB. The School of Health Professions at UAB at the time was very interested in ramping up its programs in disability studies and rehabilitation science. So again, after a couple of years of conversation, we formed a sort of a formal partnership that we call the UAB Lakeshore Research Collaborative. In that process, one of the people that we had consulted with along the way was Dr. Jim Rimmer, who was clearly the nation's leading, most published researcher related to physical activity and disability, the leading expert. Jim had been at the University of Illinois Chicago for over 20 years, and we were able to recruit Jim down here to sort of run the program, and he's been here 8-9 years, I think somewhere. Anyway, I've lost track. But Jim's done a great job. he's, continues to run our research collaborative. And there are components of that that are focused upon new program development and program evaluation. We're the home of something called the Rec Tech, or Rehab Engineering Center, that is developing new products or adapting products for related to sort of fitness and et cetera. So there's the engineering component, there's a programmatic component. In some of Jim's studies, he has a strong mindfulness component that's sort of right alongside the physical activity component. He's doing some studies that relate to what it takes to sustain an exercise program. Because I don't care who you are, more than likely you've started a program and you didn't stick with it.
Yep.
And for us, and I think for our clients, we're trying to recognize that and try to understand some of those factors that cause people to sort of fall out of a program. We're doing a lot of really interesting work related, and UAB's been a great partner. I have to tell you, in the early days, we were a little concerned, equal partnership with UAB, like they're the big dog, we're sort of the Lakeshore. Are they really gonna sort of treat this as an equal partnership? And I have to say they really have. They've been great to work with.
It makes sense. They're right there. They're known for their science and their health, and to be able to partner with them. As you're going through this, I'm just blown away. It seems like continually innovating, and from what you guys do, from the 70s when it was more active to you guys have all these activities going on, but there's a lot of valuable information here that we can use if we know how to interpret it, that'll better these services for our community. Yep. And to always be kind of like, well, what do we do now? Well, let's look at this and maybe we need to reorganize this. What are other people doing? And constantly being on that. I feel like a lot of organizations don't make it past the first step in their first few years because they don't have that mentality that you guys have of constantly looking for better ways to do things. I just think that's amazing. So you guys, and a lot of the things like this research, what I've heard in some of our previous broadcasts is a lot of assistive technology or things that come about for the disability community are found to greatly impact society at large. Like a lot of other people start using it. This is great. And you look back and you're like, well, this was actually designed for someone that has a disability. And a lot of great things come out of that research there.
Yeah, the research, when Dr. Rimmer came here, he brought with him the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability. We sort of call it NCPAD. NCPAD is a program, a national center funded by the CDC through a competitive grant. We're about to go through that sort of renewal again. But I would encourage anybody, whether you're a person with a disability, a family member, a caregiver, an educator, go to the NCPAD website. You can link to it through the Lakeshore website. It is an amazing source of information about disability and activity, and just, there is just unlimited amount of information. And part of what the real objective of NCPAD is to get that knowledge out there in the hands of people that need it. So having the NCPAD team right here on the Lakeshore campus working alongside our staff has been a huge benefit to both parties. So that's another dimension of Lakeshore that's, and one other thing I want to mention, I don't know how much more time we have, but we used to, oftentimes we still do, we often talk about what we do is the programmatic work, the research work, but a very important part of our work is what we call policy and advocacy work.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of that revolves around promoting the idea of inclusion to the community as a whole and being a resource. We want to be a resource to any and all organizations that might feel like they need some help with regard to inclusiveness or reaching out to understanding the disability community, reaching out to the disability community.
Now that could be anybody from a local business to a local YMCA, anybody.
Or the most recent example, or to the World Games, where we've developed an inclusive initiative that they have just totally embraced. The World Games will be the first ever World Games that has an inclusive component for athletes and fans and messaging, because Lakeshore said, we'll do this for you.
And that's coming next year, I believe,
in 2022.
in 2022.
But our policy and advocacy staff, they're down at City Hall talking about transportation. I mean, the point of the reason behind that element of Lakeshore is that so many people that fall within our mission face a lot of barriers. A lot of those barriers are not just financial, there are attitudinal. A lot of times they're policy barriers. People with disability need to be, if they're not physically at the table, at least their voice needs to be heard. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to, in a very, positive, proactive way, try to make sure the voice of disability is at the table. I was very proud that we were recently recognized by the Birmingham Business Journal as a leader in diversity. But among all the individuals and companies and organizations that were involved in that program, I think we were the only one that made a reference to disability as diversity. And so the diversity and equity conversations are hugely important, but we also want people to understand that people with disability are a part of that whole conversation.
Yeah, and to have that conversation at the beginning of something that's being developed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, there's in any of those areas, there's still work to be done. But I think more and more, at least I'd like to hope, that more and more people are not, that they get that, they understand that, and they have an interest in being part of the change. Mm-hmm. We can't just be, part of the reason we're doing things like that, we can't just be this place on the hill in Homewood. If you can get here, we'll help you. We need to now help people get here. We need to understand what the barriers are to that healthy, active lifestyle, and we need, to the extent that we can, we need to help them either how they on their own can sort of address those barriers, or how we can help them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is working through other organizations.
When you talk about being at the table and going to these other organizations, I think about system changes at a higher level, and you guys are able to provide that voice on behalf of the community and get to those tables and start that conversation.
Yeah, so. I think that's right. It is system change, which happens slowly.
Yeah, we would like it to happen very fast, but it's. I've heard someone say it's kind of like turning an entire Navy fleet. You kind of got to go about it pretty slow there.
Yeah, we'd like for things to happen quickly, but sometimes the things that change slowly are more likely to stay changed because they're done more thoughtfully. Mm-hmm. And you got to find that balance. The quick, rash changes, if they're not thought out. So anyway, that's.
Well, so you need a leader that can allow the staff and the community to test ideas and then kind of bring that back and say, okay, we're going to go this way a little bit more and tinker as you go.
We have to be patient with the community and with society from time to time and recognize the place that they are versus where we are. And it's there are still a lot of individuals who I think they're very interested in doing the right thing when it comes to disability, but they don't quite know what the right thing is.
Yeah.
And they're oftentimes kind of scared to do the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when you're scared that you might do the wrong thing, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
So
fear can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
In a way there. And for some of the advocacy, there are a few examples, and you mentioned one at the global scale for the World Games. What are some others at the local and national that you guys are involved in?
Okay, a lot in the work area of transportation. I know several years, it's been a couple of years now, that cities were passing safe street ordinances, and that we had folks involved in those meetings. A lot has to do with accessible public transit. Transportation is sort of huge. One of the more recent examples was right at the beginning of the pandemic. We did a national survey of people with disability, asking them what their most important needs were, just to try to make sure we understood how the pandemic was affecting people with disability. And what we found, quite frankly, was sort of health and wellness is one of the things they were most interested in continuing to do.
Yeah.
A lot of that work is just sort of asking people with disabilities sort of what they think or what their needs are, what's important to them. So I'd say, the built environment, transportation, the COVID survey that we did are some good recent examples of our advocacy work.
What do you think? Transportation is a big topic in the community. What do you think is, we now have the Ubers and the Lyfts, and then we're starting to get a little bit better, I think, public transportation. What is something that if you could focus on at a statewide level for transportation, you would kind of spearhead there?
It would just seem to me, as Jeff Underwood talking, that sort of on-demand accessible services are probably going to be the most efficient. We, rather than sort of the public sort of bus
Railway kind of thing.
Yeah, because the on-demand, we have people who some of our members will tell us that they might have to wait an hour or two for their ride here and home.
Yeah.
It might be a 4 or 5 hour experience for a 30-minute workout. And so you see folks sitting here a lot. And some folks say they can get out of the house once a day because how long they have to wait for the bus. And but an on-demand accessible service that was at a reasonable price point would seem to me to be, if you could design something today, that's probably what you'd want to look at versus a lot of more infrastructure intensive kinds of things.
Or incentivizing the current system where an Uber driver is incentivized to have, maybe more accessible entry into the vehicle or something like that, taking advantage of the current system that's there.
Or the city of the future would have sort of self-driving vehicles that don't even have to have an Uber driver. They just show up at your house with the ramp and you hop on.
Well, Elon says that's next year, but I think we're probably a while from that. As we kind of wrap up here, I'd like to ask for anybody watching now or watching in the future, if they'd like to become a member, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I would start in the early days of the pandemic. We were not accepting new members, but we are now. I would start by looking at the what's on our website, which is just lakeshore.org. And then what we really like to do is when a new member, have them take a tour. And we're not quite ready to do that. But go to the website and then, every other week or so, give us a call and say, are you offering tours for new members? But
Okay.
you can get started on the website. And you can probably even complete the process on the website. I should know that for sure. But if we can, I think people are more likely to complete the process of joining if they can physically come here, see the place, meet the people. And they will more than likely, when you're on the website, you don't know who you might be interacting with.
Well, you don't get the feel.
You don't get the feel. Yeah. And you don't realize that you're probably going to be around other people sort of like you, which gives you a comfort level.
Now, what would be the membership?
And you can even bug us. Why aren't y'all doing tours yet? Put some pressure on us to get back open.
I just imagine somebody there wanting to come in, making some code that automatically dials every 30 seconds. Like, you guys open now? You guys open now? What would be the membership dues for somebody that's looking to come and be a new member?
Oh, well, let's see. I think our rack rate for memberships for an individual is $55 a month. Then there are family rates. There are rates for larger families. There's an upcharge of a little bit. We also have a scholarship program. I think 20% of our members are on scholarship. It's not a real high bar to get a scholarship, but we're not going to turn somebody away because of a financial barrier. The people are willing to ask for financial support, and they can meet a fairly basic requirement test. They can scholarship 100% or some portion of that.
Even the 55, I pay $55 to go to the YMCA, and the facility here that you guys is far beyond my local YMCA out in Bessemer. I love Bessemer YMCA, don't get me wrong, but it's very competitive in the area.
Yeah. And our fee gets you everything except for personal training. If people want personal training, you kind of you arrange that separately with one of our staff, but it gets you the group classes, it gets you those out, the cycling trips if you want to do that, gets you access to the, to really everything. I know there's some fitness centers where you have to sort of, it's more of a menu. Here, that one flat fee gets you access to everything.
Yeah, which is nice because sometimes you go to a place and it's like a cafeteria menu where you pile on things of what you want, and then it's a lot more monthly than you originally thought. So.
And a lot of people here are, we have a really nice walking track, and for people who are interested in walking or maybe making sure that walking is part of their workout. I didn't mention that earlier, but
it's a beautiful track.
Yeah,
it really is, and it's all indoors. I would say the pool and the track I could just stare at it I could have a picture on my wall. It's just beautiful. I kind of want to get an insider's take here from your, I'll switch the topic up to legislative advocacy. That's something that we've talked quite a bit on Alabama Care. From an insider's perspective, what would you say to an individual or a family that's trying to make either a new law passed through Alabama or trying to get more representation with their local representatives? What do you think is the best way for them to get their attention and kind of ear?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you make a strong effort to reach out to your representative and let them know what's on your mind. I mean, that's their job. I mean, having been in elected office, my job is to listen to and make myself available to individuals who are my constituents. Unfortunately, that's not always as easy as it should be. There are also organizations that people can align with that are more active in that space. Disability Rights and Resources, Dan Kessler's organization, is a great resource for more legislative advocacy at the state and national level, and probably the local too. I mean, Dan's great, that's a great organization. There is a disability rights group, gosh, I should know, ADAP.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you may know?
With Mr. James Tucker?
Yeah, I think. But anyway, so there are groups that are sort of specialized in that more the sort of the legislative or governmental advocacy work. Mm-hmm. But again, I think you start by contacting your own person and let them know what's on your mind.
With Mr. Dan Kessler, we had the opportunity to be with him last month, and something that I really pointed out is on DRR's Disability Rights and Resources website. Yeah. They have a link that'll show you your own representative. All you gotta do is type in your zip code, and it's like, yep, here he is, and here's the person, and here's their contact information. But we go through that a lot. Is sometimes you'll hear, well, I wish this was different. It's like, well, have you called your representative or have you emailed them? And so that's always the first point that you'd recommend.
Yeah, I think you have to. It's almost, even though that's more than likely not going to get you where you want to get, mm-hmm. but you want to be able to say you've done that.
Yeah.
Check the box. First step, do that. You check the box. And then later on, when you're in a dialogue, either with your representative or somebody else, you can very honestly say, well, I tried to contact my representative, or I did contact my representative, and this is what they told me. Yep. Because if your answer is no, I haven't done that, then you're going to be pushed back to square one. Yeah. So get that done, and then it's a slog sometimes. I mean, you have to be persistent and you have to be patient. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately.
Now, are there any, I know things are kind of still not fully open here, but are there any upcoming events that you would like to highlight or any opportunities for someone to volunteer in the next few months or even year at Lakeshore?
We have yes to all of that, but it's still kind of up in the air. Mm-hmm. Typically by now we would have held the Pioneer Classic, which is this country's longest running wheelchair basketball tournament, as well as our Demolition Derby, a wheelchair rugby tournament. Those were not held because at the national level those sports were kind of pushed back. Our our club-based wheelchair basketball teams are just now getting started. The staff is sort of looking at whether we can still do all that this year, but do it in the summer. We potentially have a couple of months in the summer where we're doing things that we would have done over 6 or 8 months by some compressing. So we don't like to just not do certain things that we're working on. And in those events, right now we're not taking new volunteers, I don't think. Not 100% sure on that, but volunteers are a real important part of who we are and what we do. Again, just in terms of really out of the issue of safety, we have not been not been using a lot of volunteers. That will ramp back up, hopefully this late spring or summer.
That's what we
So the opportunities are there, or they will be there, and if the current trends continue with COVID, then it will be sooner rather than later.
That's what we keep hearing from DC is hopefully by summer, everything should be back to normal. And I'd like to volunteer at things that are available.
That'd be great.
So, And kind of the final one, our outro, is there anything that we haven't talked about today or something you'd like to say to an individual or family or organization that you think they could really walk away benefiting from hearing?
Well, a couple things. One, I want to cover your second point last, but one thing that you mentioned earlier about how we're always innovating and thinking forward. One of the ideas that we've had, and we've put it into a specific proposal right now as a result of our pandemic experience, is the establishment of an Alabama Virtual Wellness Center, where we feel like that we could use our technology, our expertise to develop this virtual wellness center for the benefit of Alabamians, really people anywhere, but the focus would be Alabamians, to help this state deal with its significant health issues in diabetes, obesity, stroke, and disability by offering virtual programming emanating out of Lakeshore through this really it'd be a sort of an amplified and more formalized virtual programming center. And we're in some conversations with some people at the state level about helping us support that. I don't know if we're going to get the support from the state that we hope to get.
So the numbers that you guys have gotten back from your virtual classes has been very promising.
Yeah, and I just think that's going to be, as people have gotten more comfortable with and learning virtually, and quite frankly, as a way of expanding your reach. Yeah. And we certainly are aware of the issues of the limitations on broadband access in this state, but so everybody in Alabama couldn't sort of connect today, but those issues are being addressed.
I've heard they're in the works.
I would just hoping that we get find some partners, preferably the state, on this Alabama Virtual Wellness Center. And then your last question is about what I might say to individuals. First of all, if you feel like you've sort of heard something where Lakeshore might help you, just reach out to us. I mean, you can call them. It's my email address. If you want to reach out to me personally, it's jeffu@lakeshore.org. jeffu@lakeshore.org. Or go to our website. But whether it's through Lakeshore, find some way to get active. I mean, just moving is just staying active, moving. What you can do at your house, in your neighborhood, going to a place like Lakeshore. I think we all know this already. It's just kind of intuitive that the more I get up and move around, the better I'm going to be. And we recognize that's not as easy for a lot of people as it is to say it. But so if you know of a family member, a neighbor, or a friend that you think, just pass the information along. We're here to help, and we want to work with people within our mission to promote that whole idea of healthy, active, independent lifestyle, and we want to be a resource. So I think let us help.
I love that, because that's something that somebody can do today. They can do that in the next hour and be a little bit more active.
And programs like this are tremendous for for us to sort of get the word out about who we are and what we do, and really the bigger picture of the importance of movement. If we can do that for someone, great. But just like I said, it's so important just to be as active as you can. And like I said, you can start today.
Well, Mr. Underwood, I'd like to thank you for being with us this morning and spending time with us. Everything that you guys are doing here is awesome. From the story that you guys have had since the 70s and growing into what you guys are today and continue to grow. You mentioned the virtual classes. It sounds like something in the future, VR, and being able to help individuals there is crazy, above my head. So, but thank you once again for being with us here. And we will put some links that we kind of went over today in the chat. So anybody watching in the future can click on those and visit the website. So,
well, thank you.
And at this point, we'll go ahead and end our broadcast. So we'll both kind of wave at our individual cameras here and say, see you guys next time.